Hey everybody, Sean from Media Assault here, and today I wanted to do a review of a movie that was one of my favorites when I was a kid, and that is 1957's The Curse of Frankenstein. And as you can see, this is on a two-pack DVD that I actually just picked up today. I'll talk more about the DVD when I do my DVD pickups video in a couple of days, but I did want to just talk about The Curse of Frankenstein in this video. This is a movie that was released in 1957. It was directed by Terence Fisher, and this was basically the beginning of the Hammer horror era. They wanted to do a loose remake of the Boris Karloff 1931 film of the same dealing with the same character, Frankenstein, but they were worried about getting sued and were actually threatened with legal action by Universal Studios. So what they did was, since the novel of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley was in the public domain when this came out, they kind of reverted more to a retelling of the novel than remaking the 1931 movie, even though this is not particularly faithful to the original book. But what we have here is fairly recognizable as the classic Frankenstein story. You've got Baron Frankenstein, who is played here by Peter Cushing, wanting to create from essentially spare parts a man and basically breathe life into him using various laboratory means, electricity, chemicals, and whatnot. He is aided, at least initially, by his friend Paul, who's played by Robert Urquhart. And eventually Paul decides that he's really not feeling the whole playing God thing, and he backs out. And that only fuels Victor Frankenstein's obsession even more. And, of course, eventually, whether it's by accident or on purpose, Victor Frankenstein succeeds in creating a creature who is played by Christopher Lee. I won't spoil the movie. Obviously, it's not exactly a real hard movie to figure out what happens, especially if you're even slightly familiar with the story. But the thing that's really cool about this film is sort of the history behind it and how much of a departure from horror movies of the day this really was. Remember, this was 1957 that this film came out. It was one of the first horror films to be made in color, at least for Hammer. Well, it was their first horror movie in general. But it was also one of the first horror movies to really not shy away from using blood and gore and things that we as horror fans today kind of take for granted. This movie shows, without really blinking, at least too bad for 1957, eyeballs in a jar, brains in a brain in a jar, severed hands, a severed head, which is actually covered, but it still bleeds. The creature gets shot and he bleeds. And this is all in color, so the blood has to be, the actual color. Nothing can be hidden by the fact that the film is in black and white because it's in color. And one of the things that you also have to remember about this film is it basically started a resurgence in Gothic horror. Coming at the end of the 1950s, which was a decade known for horror films that featured giant creatures that were created by radiation or atomic age type stuff, this was kind of a return to the roots of horror in general. And Hammer was the film studio that pioneered that resurgence by not only getting the Frankenstein franchise back off the ground, but also following up with Dracula. And Christopher Lee, who played the creature here, the Frankenstein's monster here, became better known as for his many portrayals of Count Dracula. And I have not seen any of the Hammer Dracula films in quite a while, but I do want to do that because I want to watch the second film on this disc, which is one of the later Dracula films. But Curse of Frankenstein was actually the first of seven Hammer horror Frankenstein retellings, which ended in the 70s, which is pretty amazing that the series managed to last that long. That's how powerful the effect of this film was. It was a box office success, brought a lot of people in to see this sort of unflinching glimpse into Gothic horror because it was in color and there's blood. And you have to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the movie-going audience back then as to, you know, them getting the first glimpse of that type of stuff. So it was a big hit. Critics hated it. I, as a critic, however, I have to kind of look at it two different ways. The nostalgia part of me wants to just, you know, reminisce about when I watched this as a kid growing up in Saturday afternoons, you know, back when they actually showed horror films on Saturdays. I loved it then. I love it now. But now I can appreciate it for what it is rather than just look at it because it's something that's creepy and scary. Obviously, it had more effect as a creepy and scary film when I was a kid than it does now. It is relatively tame now, but I do have to appreciate it for what it is. And it's a really well-made film, and really the keystone to the success of the film is Peter Cushing. His performance is just outstanding. He just becomes more and more obsessed with succeeding with this experiment of his as the film goes on. The creature plays a very small role in the entire film. The movie is only 123 minutes long. I think the creature makes his first appearance maybe an hour into the film, and really does not take up a lot of screen time at all. And the series, the Frankenstein series, as Hammer produced it, the Baron Frankenstein was always the focus, and that's really evident here, so they really set the precedent for that with this film. The minor roles in this film are fairly well done. Paul, played by Robert Urquhart, he's good. He gets a little annoying because he just seems to keep telling Victor Frankenstein to stop what he's doing and that he won't support him and stuff. And it's kind of a one-note role, but the performance is okay. Hazel Court plays Elizabeth, the future wife of Victor Frankenstein. She's not given a whole lot to do, but look pretty. Christopher Lee as the creature. Like I said, he doesn't get a lot of screen time, but it's kind of an interesting portrayal of the creature. He does sort of a, I guess I would call it sort of a combination of a child and a zombie. There's one scene in particular where you see him sort of off in the distance coming towards Victor and Paul as they're out hunting him down, and he reminded me of a zombie from Night of the Living Dead, which wouldn't show up for almost 11 more years. So this film may have had an influence on Night of the Living Dead just from that scene alone. I could be wrong, but I could see a similarity there. So if I had to rate this film, this is one of those films where I'm kind of torn because, like I said, I have a sort of nostalgic attachment to it. It is not a superior film. It is historically significant. I'd have to give it an 8 out of 10. Just sort of combining that nostalgia piece and the historical significance of the film for kicking off the Hammer horror series. But just sitting down and appreciating it as a horror film, it is a really well done film. It is a bit slow, but it does pay off with a kind of a cool ending. And I really did like the ending of this film, which again I won't give away. And I think that really makes up for sort of the slow beginning of it. But highly recommended is The Curse of Frankenstein. And I don't know if it's available separately on DVD. I'm sure it is, but this is how I found it. So I hadn't seen it in quite a long time of it on video at all, so I snapped it up when I saw it at the first opportunity. So I recommend you do the same. So, okay, thanks everybody for watching. As always, if you like what you see, rate, comment, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already. And I want to thank everybody who's subscribed recently. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate the support I've been getting on the channel. And as always, if there's anything you'd like to see me review on the channel, or anything you'd like me to talk about or whatever, send me a note, and I'd be glad to get on that. So thanks again, everybody. Bye.